companies and also to mobilize public and private capital into the wash economy. So that's just a brief introduction about Aqua for All. I will be, in this case, moderating or facilitating the conversation among the speakers that are invited. And I want to briefly introduce them to you. We have from Aqua for All, Josine Slaus, Dina Pons from Incofin, Alexandre Naime from BNP Paribas, Davide Lorigiola from Triple Jump, and Darren Mayo from Waterorg. So if we go into the agenda of the session, what do we want to do today? We want to first go into the session setup or setting up the scene on introduction, where we want to talk a little bit about the context and the objectives, then discuss briefly about the action groups and what are they, and then go into a few examples of indicators to start warming up into the topic. Then I will give the floor to some of the speakers in Aqua for All, Incofin, BNP, Triple Jump, and Waterorg. Then I will open the floor for any additional input from the audience. And then towards the end, we will try to do a wrap up. That's what we wanted, how we want to cover the session. So if we go into the session introduction, the idea behind this session was to, again, complement the initial session about investing in water and sanitation, because we believe that there are many investors that find it difficult to grow its water and sanitation portfolio, in many cases because they lack the clarity about the sector or because they perceive it as very risky. And sometimes this happens because there's information or data that can be missing in the sector that is either limited or scattered or is non-standardized. And that's where we want to try to support and help in building something up. As Aqua for All, in combination with e-MFP, we are looking into building an action group where we can actually tackle some of the information gaps or indicator gaps that we see in the water and sanitation sector. As mentioned, the objective of the session is to, in the end, get some member buy-in and input from the audience and from the members to define and shape the water and sanitation action group that we want to build up. The initial topic that we're proposing on the table is indicators and benchmarks, which is a potential topic. But again, in this session, we want to hear from your perspective what you have to say about that. But also we are open to hearing other things that you might need as investors to become more comfortable in participating in the water and sanitation sector. So I jump a little bit into giving more information about the action groups. Action groups are working groups that e-MFP builds with other stakeholders, and they try to tackle a problem and provide some sort of deliverable at the end of this trajectory of work. So what would that look like in terms of a process, in terms of next steps? First, we want to define a topic, and that's where the input that we collect from this session will be very valuable. We want to also get endorsement from at least 4 e-MFP members so that we can actually move forward with this action group. The logical next step after we have the first 2 would be to create some sort of proposal or terms of reference of the action group members. And then after that, we will start taking more action in sourcing the capacity that we need to work on these selected topics in coordination with e-MFP and obviously Aqua for All. And the interactions that we would have with the members, e-MFP members that are sponsoring this initiative, is to have certain touch points so that we can report on progress and they can provide some input guidance to the action group. They are not necessarily expected to work full time on this. They are expected to be unfolding a role of a steering committee or something like that, just to clarify what the role would be of the sponsors of the e-MFP members. Now, if I speak a little bit more about previous experiences, I thought it was better to put an example out there. An example of a previous action group was an action group that was developed around the topic of consumer protection in off-grid solar. And this was done in combination with GOGLA, which is an association for off-grid solar companies, and with, I believe, CDC, FMO, and people from e-MFP as well. So here they saw the need to actually try to define and measure the consumer protection that is being provided by off-grid solar companies. And because of this need that was identified, they worked on a track where they managed to produce as deliverables a certain set of principles for consumer protection that are the ones that you see in the screen. They defined 6 of them: transparency, good product quality, personal data privacy, fair and respectful treatment, good consumer service, and responsible sales and pricing. Now, for each of these principles, they develop a set of indicators so as to be able to self-assess their level of consumer the level of consumer protection that they were providing in the market. And this tool became somehow useful because it became a good way to standardize and measure their capacity for consumer protection and be able to communicate, for instance, with investors in the same language in terms of showing, okay, this is the level of consumer protection that I provide, and for investors to have a clear tool that they can understand to measure it across different companies. Now the question is, this as a previous example, if something like this could be an idea for something to develop in the water and sanitation sector. If we could create something like this in terms of a framework or a scorecard where we could define certain indicators to help us maybe define whether a water and sanitation stakeholder or company is investment ready, or if it's what is their level, or what are the gaps that they need to actually become investment ready. But first we will need to define certain indicators to build a framework and build a tool for that. So this is just as an idea of something that could work, and I just put it out there for conversation and further food for thought. Now, going a little bit more into the topic and into the water and sanitation indicators, I believe there are 3 levels where impact investors can participate. Basically, at MFI level, at the level of funds and innovative finance structures, and also at the level of SMEs. The question is, should we actually define different set of indicators for each of these levels? Most likely, yes. That would mean that we will need to maybe create frameworks for each of these. This is one of the things that triggers discussion. At what level should we produce indicators, or to what extent we should prioritize one of these sectors to produce these kind of indicators? Now, if we categorize the type of indicators that we would like to produce, the most common out there are the financial and social impact ones, but there are also some business indicators that are relevant, especially when you look at SMEs in water and sanitation. They have certain measurements that might say something about the performance of a business in this sector, and maybe that's also important to collect. This is, again, a proposed breakdown of how we could categorize some of these indicators. And the next question that I would ask is how general, how specific these indicators should be. Should they be at the whole water and sanitation sector level, or they should be per water and per sanitation, or should we focus them at safe water enterprises, for instance, or at water technology company level? Those are also questions that are valuable to ask ourselves at this point. These are just a few more examples on the kind of information that it's out there. In this case, this is related to Waterorg and their water credit impact, where they show a certain number of variables from a social perspective, but also from a portfolio performance perspective. And they collect this through their monitoring. This is available at the level of a financial institution that actually lends wash products, right? On the other side, if we focus ourselves at SME level, this is what Aqua for All collects in terms of their M&E framework, monitoring and evaluation. So we have a set of core monitoring indicators, and then some specific indicators per subsector, sanitation or drinking water. So this is also a structure that we could follow if we would try to define something, maybe having a main set of indicators and they're differentiated ones per subsector. So this again is something to put out there to trigger the conversation as an idea of a potential structure, and to also to show the kind of indicators that we find out there. In many cases, social, and many cases business oriented as well. So at this stage, I would like to hand the floor to some of the financiers that are joining us today, and that I briefly introduced at the beginning. Just as good housekeeping and to try to manage time, everyone has been informed about the time that we have, but just in case we're running out of time, I would actually use this little tool that is from my 10-month daughter, and it's like a little bell to try and actually ask you to round up your ideas if I believe that the time is actually going too much, okay? So to start with, I would like to hand over to Josine Slaus, Managing Director of Aqua for All, for her to share her perspectives on the topic.
Thank you so much, Alvaro, for this introduction. It's very, very useful. I think that the most important thing that I wanted to share with the people that are listening in is that, you know, for many of the topics that we have put on the agenda with e-MFP, it is very relevant to work on what is needed in order for us to move the sector. And as I used to be on the board of e-MFP, I'm very appreciative of, you know, all the valuable work that comes out, which is also internationally very much respected. And while I was director of the Netherlands Platform for Financial Inclusion and working with the Dutch impact investors, I noticed very much that, you know, the whole enabling environment, the understanding of the sector is so important for investors to be able to really weigh risk and return. On top of that, I also noticed that, you know, whatever is going out there in the market does not always fit with what investors need. And there's quite often a mismatch in understanding of what is needed, etc. So my aim with Aqua for All is to really work to more, you know, building that bridge between what investors need and what people who are active in the market, working on getting businesses to investee readiness, etc., are doing the right job. And so one of the things in the discussions that I had with the different investors is that, you know, it needs to be very clear what we're talking about. We need to have a very clear perspective of benchmarks and indicators. And I've seen a lot of very interesting reports being published on, you know, how do you get private funding into the water and sanitation sector, but there's so much hesitance from the side of the impact investors to really take on, you know, this topic as one of their asset classes. And so this is the reason why we reached out to the people that are, you know, participating in the European Microfinance Week, and especially the ones that are on the call just now, to determine what exactly is it that we need in order for us to take the next steps. And I think we have a few others on board who could really highlight why they see WASH as an interesting opportunity and what is needed. So Alvaro, if you don't mind, I think it's important to continue with the others, to give them the floor and highlight why they want to be part of such an, you know, a trajectory.
Indeed, and the first person that I would call is Dina, because I also understand that Dina has a back-to-back session to this one, and she might need to leave earlier. So Dina, please feel free to contribute.
Thank you very much, Alvaro and Yusine. So if I take a step back and reflect on Incofin's experience in, you know, wanting to set up a fund in the space of drinking water, I would say that the first challenge we face is to prove the financial performance of these water businesses. So I think one key set of indicators that I think we need to start, you know, we could work on is very much trying to understand what are the basic type of financial performance within the sector. That's one. And within this, I think trying to, differentiate or be very specific on the type of indicators related to, for instance, to the fact that a lot of businesses are still helped by grant and subsidies. So I think when we talk to water businesses, we see that sometimes they say, oh, we're EBITDA positive, we're net profit, but that's because they've been traditionally relying on grant funding. So for them, they see their profitability profile, including this. I think there's a whole conversation here on trying to, just be transparent and say, let's just agree on what is the net income that is the pure fruit of your operations of your business, and what is the net income that is helped, that has been supported by the fact that you're benefiting from carbon credit, or by the fact that you're benefiting from CSR funding in the Indian context, which can be seen as a very reliable source of funding. But I think here, just that first step on investment readiness and profitability, I think it would be great if we could just come up with 3-4 key non-revolutionary financial performance related indicators. That would be one. Then again, reflecting on the conversations we have with potential LPs, the second concern they have, or things they want us to answer, is of course, the social impact, not only from a pure number of liters, but also on the how and the who, right? It's one thing to provide liters of water today. It's another thing to provide them in a safely managed way. And I think we are all here, or at least people in the drinking water, are here to back businesses that are here to promote sustainable solutions. So again, what are the type of key SDGs beyond SDG 6 that we think we can claim we contribute to? I think it would be great to be able to say that all water stakeholders agree that this is the spectrum of SDGs that we are working towards. And agree on those, and then within each of these SDGs, agree on 2-3 key output indicators. Again, water and the how of water is one. Affordability, I think there are a number of guidelines on affordability that we hear out. Sometimes it's WHO, sometimes it's OECD. So can we agree on what are the type of living standards and net purchasing power data points that are available maybe from the World Bank, and then have a tool? And we are working on such a tool at Incofin, but we don't claim that we know whether it's already industry standards. But I think, again, affordability would be a key one within the social impact conversation. And then also, I think, to kind of kill the prejudice that, okay, water, what is it? Is this like big infrastructure? Is it asset-heavy project? I think we need to find a way to quickly make people understand that we're talking about very local economy businesses, and that therefore there's a whole other set of impact-related indicators, as I was saying previously, in the context of economic growth, right? How many jobs are being created? A lot of times it's franchises business models. So these were entrepreneurs that before did not have a job. Can we try to track that to show that we're building local entrepreneurship and we are creating a revenue generation activities within local communities? So that would, still fall for me into the subcategory of social impact indicators. So that would be, financial on one hand, social impact on the other hand. That would be my second idea. Then the third one is the investors are telling us, today you cannot overlook the climate factor. And I think having indicators around not only how we're trying to do good and back green solutions, I think that definitely needs to be part of our indicators list, but also what are the type of climate risk resilience indicator that we can agree on. And I think the Dalberg study has shown a few already ideas. Maybe we can tap into that report and agree again on a subset without go too complicated at first, but proving that they are replenishing strategies, harvesting water strategies, looking at location selection in a very precise manner. I think that's another key subset of indicators. And the final one is trying to answer the concern of the water quality. How can you ensure to me that the water would be of high quality so that I don't end up in the newspaper with a high reputation risk because something went bad? And I think here we're trying at Incofin to develop technology risk due diligence framework where, we want to look at, beyond national standards, where that the type of benchmarks that you have to comply with, that we want to agree with a potential investee on helping them comply with. So here again, there are lots of oftentimes, local regulations, international regulations. Can we agree on what is the middle ground of these quality indicators? And linked to water quality, and that would be my final words. On the tech side, I think we hear a lot, okay, what does that mean? You want to back technology companies? Are you going to end up, being in the tech VC business? Not at all, right? So a tech company can be as simple as a home filter. And what here we hope that maybe we can define through this group is just what is at bottom of the pyramid with an economies of scale business model technology solution. And are there certain indicators like, agreeing on operational complexity, cost, energy, and efficiency, just a simple list of maybe 3 to 6 indicators. And if we had this kind of scorecard, financial, social, environmental, water quality / tech, I think that there would be a great framework to then, again, not making it too overwhelming, because we could ideally use this as a conversation with potential investees to say, hey, these are eligibility criteria. Can you tell me where you stand? Right? So it can't be too overwhelming at first, but at least that ideally, if we agree on this list, then all of us are pretty much collecting the same thing. And today we're collecting it individually. Tomorrow we create a database, and the day after tomorrow we have an industry database, and we can play with benchmarks. I mean, in 5-10 years horizon, right? But that would be kind of.
Yeah,
So
indeed, Dina, because I'm sorry, Justine, because indeed to be able to benchmark them, there needs to be indicators that need to be agreed across different companies and across the sector, so that we can actually create those benchmarks. So agreeing on them and actually communicating them across the sector and making this framework or tool useful would actually be an important step as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sorry, Josine, I interrupted you.
We had exactly the same remark, Alvaro. Thank you for that.
Oh, sorry, I stole it from you then.
No, even better.
Excellent. Well, Dina, I think we'll leave it there with you, because you have also a back-to-back session that you need to join. So thank you very much for your contribution.
No worry. I have another 15 minutes, so I'm happy to listen in as well, and then I will indeed hang up and let you proceed. Thank you.
Excellent. So then we would, the next person that we would like to share would be Alexandre from BNP Paribas. Alexandre, please feel free to share.
Great, thanks a lot, Alvaro. Thanks, Josine. So my name is Alexandre Nem. I'm working for BNP Paribas. I'm an investment officer looking at financial inclusion, social business, and impact investing, especially for Africa. And the reason why we think our contribution can be useful is that we are looking actually at investing into the Incofin Danone Fund, Water Access Acceleration Fund. We've been performing a long-lasting due diligence, asking a lot of questions, and it has been the first foray for BNP Paribas, specifically on this under this thematics. So to give you a little bit more information about the bank's experience, so we've financed a lot of projects related to water, of course, infrastructures mainly, public-private projects, grid bonds that often include water-related projects. There has even been a water-specific bond issued by the Asian Development Bank, but from no one there has been no dedicated specific approach or no guidelines internally to approach the sector. So the idea is with when we are looking at Incofin Danone Fund is to learn about the specificities of the wash and more specifically of the safe water sector. So most of the institutional investors are not specialists; they are generalists. So they need to spend a lot of time understanding the different dimension and what is at stake economically, environmentally, but also socially when addressing a particular sector. So it's a bit complicated because most of the things we are looking at are not specific to the water industry. It's specific to any particular industry where people looking at them are not engineers, they are not experts, they are not specialists. But I think it's more interesting here to focus on what makes the water sector a bit different from the rest. Also, I would like to state that the water sector is a very exciting sector, and that's one of the reasons why we would like to invest a bit more proactively in it, and we should not forget it, because this particular session is about the existing shortcomings, the reason why the sector is not considered as investable enough for the community. But we should not forget that it's very exciting. It's very easy to sell. It's easy to sell water. It's easy to sell the concept of water because it's part of our everyday life. We all are lucky enough to have tap water directly in our homes. But exactly the same way that we benefit from this water every day, we don't know and we don't understand at all where this water is coming from, and that's exactly the same thing for impact investing dedicated to water. In order to invest in the sector, you need to look at behind the scene and discover exactly how it works. So what Yusin mentioned on the value chain is of course very, very important, especially the private value chain in water. That's something you would it would help you to identify the position of the investment you are looking at on this value chain, which is which actually explain its unique value proposition. So it's very important. Of course, you also need to understand the impact thesis and the theory of change, which is implied by the investments that are going to be performed by the fund. For the water sector, what is extremely different from the rest is that they are the public and the private sector are very much mingled together. They are very much mixed together, and you need to have people helping you to understand what are the relationship, how those those two very different types of actors are actually acting together. And for the wash sector in particular, you also need to add the entrepreneurs themselves, of course, but also the NGOs and all the development sector, which also adds, not a level of complexity, but just another type of actor that you may not be very, very familiar to work with. And then, of course, you need to, you need figures. You need to crunch figures. You need to be able to challenge your facts and to challenge the business plan that has been provided to you by the investment manager. And if there has not been like proper track records, which is the case, for instance, for the W2EAF fund, you need to be able to challenge the hypotheses which are made by the investment manager. What is really helpful for these particular issues of getting access to track record and to data is to also rely on the transparency of the sector and to know if there has been different types of investor investing in the same sector, and if they are also willing to share their experience, to share their facts and their figures. We know it's very critical for the normal private equity business, but in the impact investing one, links between different organizations, such as Waterorg and Aqua and the likes, are very much stronger, and there is a real consensus about the added value of having this transparency and sharing those information. Looking at the indicators in particular, of course, yes, we as investor, we are always going to ask for more and more indicators, more and more That's so you should not take our our requests for what is actually achievable, but you need them to be smart, as for all indicators. You need to look at them first at the water company level, and then at the final beneficiary level. Of course, that would be a first way to structure them. And one of the upside of the one of the advantage, I would say, of the water sector is that those indicators can be very easily understandable by the investor and by the general public. So it's also great strength for the sector. We would, in priority, we would like, of course, to start with focusing on the beneficiaries, of those projects. We would also look at the price bed, the usage of water, the quality of water. But these are all types of indicators that have been mentioned in the previous presentation already. And just to finish, I would say that as far as this new e-MFP working group is concerned, I think it would be very helpful to help new investor with the popularization of technical and specific concepts related to the water sector. Work on the dissemination of commonly accepted terminology. That's something which is very, very helpful. We know, I've discovered, for instance, that there are official types of water quality. It's something that of course I didn't know. There are different types of business model in the water sector, of course, with the franchise model and so on. There are different strategies that can be adopted by the entrepreneurs. The general understanding of the value chain, so having also a kind of commonly shared private value chain that would be useful. To have some type of specific guidelines, due diligence guidelines for investors, mostly inspired from the guideline used by the investor company at investee level. That's something, it's always much more easier than starting from a blank page. Having some kind of standards, exactly what, just like Alvaro showed on the consumer protection from Gogla, but focusing on consumer protection and having some kind of shared practices and shared standard would be of course very, very useful. And a very final point before I finish is the fact that we should all rely on of course the SDG framework, and Dina made a mention to the existing outputs under the SDG number 6, and of course that would make a perfect start on such consensual indicators that could be widely shared and appreciated by investors.
Thanks, Alexander. Thanks for your thorough commentaries. I particularly like the fact when you mentioned that new investors should be, that we should popularize for new investors the technical part of water, the technical concept, the terminology, because that's maybe something new for you, and that's where maybe we being experts in water can actually support on that as well, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's very valuable. Thank you very much. I'm gonna move on now to Davide, given the time. Please, Davide.
Yeah, thank you, Alvaro. Funny because I have my son has the same bell, so I suspect this is quite a popular Dutch toy, it seems. My name is Davide Lorigiol. I work for Triple Jump, which is a responsible asset manager. Been around for a decade and a half, and really pioneering investments into emerging markets, mostly microfinance institutions, providing debt, equity, and technical assistance. I specifically work as an investment manager within the market development department team, which you can think of as sort of the lab where we at Triple Jump sort of test new ideas and products, which is actually it gives me good exposure to interesting things. It's certainly not boring. yeah, as I said, Triple Jump traditionally has been investing into microfinance institutions, funds, and more recently we have opened up to direct investments in the energy sector. And I think we are seriously considering investing directly in the wash sector as well. And I guess the reason is that, well, I mean, numbers are pretty self-explanatory. If one is not intentional about it, then you end up having, numbers close to, the low single-digit percentage in terms of capital really going to the sector. And I think, look, what I want to share is really the perspective of what we are, which is basically new kids on the block when it comes to investing into wash, and specifically the perspective from investing into SMEs directly in sub-Saharan Africa, because I think this is where most of our portfolio is concentrated at the moment. Look, I think for simplicity, we can split this sort of in different levels. The first one being at the SME level, I guess. The word of caution here is that investing into SMEs is challenging, no matter what. And I think these should be sort of the starting point because of the high transaction costs, because of information asymmetry. But I think indeed, investing in SMEs is difficult. When it comes to wash, I have the feeling that echoing a bit what Alexander was saying, this is probably a sector is not so familiar to many. I have the feeling that we know a lot about IT these days, about energy. I mean, lately, wash not so much, other than probably the water bottling companies that are more FMCG companies, but otherwise not so much. And also it's a sector with often interconnections with donors, the public sector. So these are lower sort of complexities adding up to an investor sort of entering the space for the first time. To that, I mean, there are some challenges at the sector level, and I think I see the long shot as Dina was mentioning about benchmarks and comparables, but really I think what we miss at the moment is even a sense of it depends very much by country, right? But I mean, sometimes we even lack sort of the sense of the market size or the number of active companies, the business vintage. So if I am to invest into a sanitation company, say in Uganda, I can get a grasp by teaming up with a technical partner if the solution is viable. Still, I may not know how many companies are offering that product services in the market, how big is the market per se. And let's assume that I have investment criteria of lending only to businesses that have been around for, say, 3 to 5 years. Maybe the result is zero because the business vintage of the old segment in a country, it's just nascent. So these are the kind of informations that would help not only selecting the single investment, but also creating a portfolio. So constructing a portfolio with a fund perspective. And it's not sort of an easy or sort of short sort of shot. It's something we have to build, but I guess that would increase dramatically the confidence of investors into sort of into the sector. And last but not least, I think a bit on a more meta level, I still see a bit of tension between philanthropy investing for decades basically into our sector and having a bit of distance with the commercial sort of activity. And I guess there's still some work to do to try to incorporate in the social impact the how would I call it, sort of the overall economic outcome of these investments. And I think this is important because this is particularly important for impact investors, but I still see that a lot of indicators around WASH really focus directly on, say, access, and not necessarily again on the full economic information around it. So for instance, if you could better estimate the economic cost of, say, poor water and sanitation, I think that also building and scaling the successful models would be just much sort of easier, more sustainable.
Thank you, David. I understand that in your perspective, we should even take one step back and even look at not only the indicators that we need for individual investments, but also to actually evaluate the markets, and to go into that, with certainty that, we can build a portfolio there. I think that's a good point, and interesting perspective as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll move now to Darren. Darren, please.
No, thank you very much, Alvaro. You know, the perspective I kind of want to give is more, I think, on a little bit from the implementer side. So Water.org, we are a nonprofit organization that is focusing on solving the global water crisis. And so we have programs in 13 countries, and we work mainly with finance institutions, but also with SMEs and water utilities, in honestly really trying to help them access more capital. And so, you know, I kind of want to provide from that perspective. As Water.org, we are not, I would say, per se, an investor ourselves. We are more focused on trying to get folks like everyone else on this panel to invest into this sector. From our perspective, there's really three key things we wanted to share as we talk about kind of the indicators. You know, and I think the first one is, as Dina and I think Josian had all mentioned, I think getting a common set of indicators or benchmark is incredibly important. And the reason I say that is we see there's a lot of discrepancy between the metrics between what NGOs and foundations really want to track, and then also kind of the metrics, you know, that investors like BNB, Ecofin, and the others really want to see. And that discrepancy actually really plays itself out when you start going into the field, when you're really starting talking with the finance institutions or the SMEs, because for them, reporting out on these metrics, it's not that they don't want to, but there is a cost associated with it. And if there's not a common set of metrics, what we've noticed, right? So they typically have to report out different metrics depending on where they're getting their source of capital from, whether it be from foundations, you know, or from investors, right? And at some point for them, it just becomes extremely costly or time consuming. You know, but also the secondary one on that is, you know, as we develop the indicators, there needs to be a lot of thought given about, well, how are we making sure that it gets implemented by those in the field? You know, and I can speak from one example. You know, we recently took a deep dive into some of the commercial banks we work with to better understand their wash SMA lending portfolio. What we found in a number of these commercial banks is these are some of the most sophisticated commercial banks, you know, in Kenya, Uganda. What we realize is they even don't really how they track what they are actually doing within the wash space. A lot of them, it's not very well tracked, even though they have very sophisticated MIS systems. You know, for them, again, it all comes down to the cost. For them to actually track the indicators that we either as investors or implementers would want them to report out, for them, it's a, you know, for the large organizations, it just doesn't make sense for them. Or it's just, you know, they have so many other competing priorities, you know, in terms of what to do with their MIS or to report out, that unless there's significant capital out there, you know, the incentive for them, so they may say, oh, we're just going to stick it under our SME. So then, for example, when we are doing this deep dive, Water.org, we have to do a lot of the cleaning up of the data. And we know that can be a significant barrier for a lot of the capital providers because, you know, they probably don't have the time to actually really scrub through that data, right? And again, it all comes down to if there is not a common set of benchmarks, you know, that I would say investors kind of are all using, you know, if they are getting due diligence by, you know, 2 or 3 capital providers and each of them have their own different set of impact indicators, you know, that quickly that can be a significant barrier, particularly as we're talking about impact investors. You know, I think on the financial indicator side, you know, as Dina mentioned, I think there are common, you know, it will be relatively straightforward to figure out what would be the common metrics, you know, but I think on the impact side, there really needs to be this kind of standardization, and they should, and that's why I'm excited about this working group. It will require kind of bringing all the different stakeholders from the NGO foundation side, the DF side, but then also the commercial investors to really ideally agree on, you know, what are the 5 or 6 key indicators on the impact side we want to look at. And obviously it will be different by the sector that you're looking at. You know, those impact indicators for a water utility likely is going to be very different than, you know, for example, a water purification SME or, you know, a toilet construction, you know, SME, right? So there needs to be that. But I think the more standardization, then it'll be easier to start getting, I think, the businesses and the investees to really start adopting them, right? And, you know, but then again, all of that, you know, I guess I just want to end on, there needs to be consideration, and this is why I would say a foundational DFI issue, then it's once there's agreement on what those indicators are, how do we make sure that the SMEs, the FIs, all the potential investees actually build it into their processes? And there likely will need to be TA support in really operationalizing it, right? It's one thing to say, yes, we know what we want to report out on, but I think there needs to be a lot of consideration given to, particularly as you start getting into, you know, moving down market to the smaller SMEs, you know, that probably don't have very sophisticated kind of MIS systems, backend systems. You know, how do we make it manageable for them to collect the information that doesn't overwhelm them, that takes their focus off of kind of their core business activities? So those, I guess, are the three key points that I would just want to share, kind of from our perspective of just working with a number of these potential investees in the field.
Indeed. Thanks, Darren, for the input. I think it's very interesting the perspectives that you gave, because it's not only on defining the indicators, but it's actually the next step of how to implement them, and how some institutions on the field don't necessarily have the incentive, because it's cost intensive or time intensive, you know, so they don't have the incentive to necessarily monitor or record this. So how do we actually, besides defining them, how is it that we actually implement them across the board in the sector, even with smaller players, but in conjunction with big players as well, right? So I think that's a very valid point, actually, that I wanted to highlight. Yeah, thank you very much. At this point, we've shared the input from our key speakers, but we would like to open the floor to the rest of the audience who is in this call, to see if they have any further input or insights that they want to share with us. You can feel free to unmute and share.
Hi, Alvaro.
Oh, I think we lost Lucia. She was about to share something. We lost her. Oh, there you are. Yeah.
I'm sorry, something happened and I appear to be as a panelist, apologies. But yes, exciting to see all this, and congrats for this very inspiring work. Just if useful, wanted to share with this group some early lessons learned from the solar home system off-grid sector, in addition to the traditional financial inclusion one, where you know, this process of getting together as a group of investors, practitioners, and other experts, setting a first set of standards, also drawing from international ones when available, and then testing and finding a viable solution to make this operational, was precisely the goal of a project that was made this year. It is called Pay-Go Perform, for those of you who also invest in the access to energy space, but the idea is precisely the same. And it is especially more important, to Darren's point, to be effective in asking what we need and speaking the same language and offering assistance to let companies know how the indicators can be calculated when the counterparty is small and not necessarily sophisticated in terms of resources. We should have never done this, even in the financial inclusion space. We have done it. We are trying to work on that on Atlas side to bring more harmonization to the reporting. But definitely this is a big lesson learned, and we have an opportunity in WASH not to repeat the same proliferation, you know, of standards as we did in financial inclusion. And this is what seems to be happening right now in the Pay-Go space. So a positive message of yes, this is very important. Yes, this can be done. There are luckily experience that can teach us lessons and recent examples of practical ways how to make this work.
Thanks, Lucia. Good to know that there are these examples out there that we can actually build on. You know, I think it's very valid, the PayGo example that you just mentioned. So I will definitely follow up on that to see what we can do with that.
Hello, Álvaro.
Hi, Natalia. I think you
Yes.
muted yourself. Yeah, there you go.
Good. I would like to participate.
Oh, you muted it again, Natalia. We cannot hear you, Natalia. I think you're muted again. Natalia, I don't know if you're trying to speak, but we cannot hear you. Right? You're muted. I'm asking you to unmute, as I have some rights as a moderator, but you need to unmute first so we can hear you.
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Hello, Álvaro. Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
I have some company, that's why it's a little... And I have the same toy, exactly. Yeah, maybe if you play with the toy. Yeah, but I wanted to share with you, I'm also working on indicators and, as I said, developing tools for helping organizations collecting data in the field. And we have already done a tough academic work. Yeah, if I can share my screen. Wait.
I don't know if it's possible, Natalia, because we have some sort of webinar session. I don't know if it's possible to share. Maybe you can tell us what.
Yeah, I will then share only the links over the chat.
Yeah.
So we have we have tools for data collection at household level, so that it is harmonized with the methodology from the UN GMP program. And we have these tools can be whether web-based or used in Android devices for officers. And then we enable access to dashboards and digital reports, so access to this so that they can easily report also to the investors, and there is no need like to a PDF report that will be then archived, and they don't have to do the work of establishing which should be the ones that have to be developed. And this is in short version, in more in-depth version. And now I would like to share this also to the group. And if there is like, we have like the resources for further developing these tools for household-based assessment. And that will be the complement into these social indicators, so to say. And on the other side, I have funding for the upcoming year, starting now in November, for data collection projects supporting microfinance institutions or SMEs that give financing for water projects. And I will be glad if, like if there could be also potentials for collaboration with here the participant, like within here this action group, so that there could be this type of research. So the floor is open also to start this. And we are talking about how costly this data collection can be. So this could be a good opportunity.
Thank you, Natalia. Thanks for the input and letting us know about these tools that are available. Yeah. We have only a few more minutes, so maybe just one last short intervention, if there's a burning intervention that needs to be shared at this point from the audience.
Alvaro, if I may.
Shabana, hi.
Hi. So everybody, it was really nice hear from financiers, their perspective, very insightful. I have a question. It doesn't need to be answered right now, but it's mostly for Triple Jump. Given that you've worked in other housing related investments, I was just wondering if you have any experience of water being part of that whole housing portfolio, and how do you see it? And if there are any insights or learning for us to take that into account. We can also take it offline later, but just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thanks, Shabana. I think it's a very good question. Davide, given the time, could I please ask you to take it offline with Shabana? I think,
no problem at all. Yeah.
I think it's going to be very more effective that way as well.
Yeah.
Well, I want to use this 1 minute to just close the session. I think we've heard very interesting input from different kind of investors and players in the water and sanitation sector. People that are already on the horse, people that are considering to invest or to participate. What we are going to do now is to consolidate this input and then try to have a follow-up meeting, conversations with e-MFP to try to come up with a potential topic, something that can be discussed, a draft proposal. And then at some point, once we manage to come up with something concrete, we will communicate to members and see what the next steps would be in order to launch this action group. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what we would try to do next. Josine, I don't know if you want to have a last words before we close.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alvaro. I think the main purpose of this session was to really brainstorm and share insights, which I think we've done, and it's very much appreciated. And also for the ones that have participated and feel like they want to become part of that working group, do indeed please reach out to Gabriele or anyone of the team of e-MFP, or otherwise even to us. I think the information is out there on the slide decks. We would very much appreciate your support and collaboration with you. So thanks all of you for contributing, and hope to see you in all the next that is coming up on the work on investing for WASH. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, have a nice afternoon and good morning or good night, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, all of you.
Thanks.
Thank you.